All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Ellie Amador and I'll be your host. I work for the University of Tennessee System and I am one of the organizers of the Pandemic to Possibility webinar series. While the pandemic has caused great adversity, it's also led to great innovation. And sharing these success stories in hopes of inspiring more collaboration and momentum is why we created the series. We're grateful to our partners at the Tennessee Chamber and Alliance for Better Nonprofits for making today possible. We're also grateful to our speakers for dedicating their time and sharing their expertise. Before I introduce them, let me spotlight you for a moment. We have more than 50 people registered to attend live today, and you represent a wide range of organizations, including, for example, Bailey Hydraulics, Crescent Sock Company, FedEx, Axis Fabrication and Machine, and the town of Spring City. On behalf of everyone involved, welcome. And if I didn't mention your organization, please take a moment now to type it in the chat so that we can get a better understanding of our audience today. This afternoon, we're presenting the session titled Manufacturing Leadership, Navigating Change in the Face of a Crisis. You'll learn the importance of creating a culture of engagement, how to promote a learning mindset within an organization that engages all team members in problem solving and innovation, how to help manage an organization's internal people development system more effectively, and how to assist an organization in exploring and navigating a transition to Industry 4.0 technologies. 3 housekeeping points before I introduce our speakers. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box, and I'll bring them up at the end during our Q&A section of the presentation. We are recording the session today for future viewing on our website, which is webinars.tennessee.edu. And you will all receive an email once the recording is posted. And lastly, we expect everyone to follow a code of conduct that is outlined on our webinar website. With that, allow me to introduce our presenters. We have with us today Rupi Sawhney. He is the founder of Sawhney Solutions and is a distinguished professor and health fellow in business and engineering in the Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering at UT Knoxville. He also serves as the executive director of the Center for Advanced Systems Research and Education at UT Knoxville, where he leads a team of nearly 30 staff and graduate students. He has developed the Sawhney model, which uniquely focuses on people-centered operational excellence strategies. Overall, he and his team have partnered with more than 200 companies on operational excellence projects. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Sawhney.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We also have Tim Waldow. In his role as workforce development consultant with the UT Institute for Public Services Center for Industrial Services, Tim works with Tennessee manufacturers on workforce development opportunities. His passion for helping people discover their potential has been a primary motivator throughout his career, which includes more than 17 years in the manufacturing sector and many years in the service sector prior to that. Lastly, also with the UT Institute for Public Service, we have Danny Norman. Danny joined the Center for Industrial Services in 2018 as an advanced manufacturing specialist. In this role, he assists small manufacturers with Industry 4.0, advanced materials, and other technology applications. Prior to joining UT, he worked as a technology commercialization specialist, focusing on patent licensing of energy tech, smart sensors, mechanical systems, and other commercialization opportunities. Thank you to the 3 of you for dedicating your time preparing and for speaking with us today. With that, I'll turn it over to Rupi to get us started.
Our focus today is to take a look at several different concepts. One is the use of systems to be able to understand the pandemic, and then to take a look at this idea of servant leaders within what I am going to be talking to you about, and then subsequently about other people within an organization and the use of technology and continuous improvement. I think you have to kind of understand the pandemic from a systems definition. And here, what we're looking at, if you're looking at manufacturing, we're looking at every system has a function, an element, and an interaction of elements. The function in this case is to increase productivity and enhance quality of life within the pandemic and post-pandemic. That's really the focus. When we say, what do we look at? We look at elements. And what are elements? Elements are all resources that we need. In this case, we have people, material, equipment, information, technology, etc. down the line. This is the elements that we work with. And how we put these elements together to achieve a goal or a function is really important. And our focus at this moment is to look at things that are sustainable and reliable. We're going to look at this definition on how to be able to increase productivity and enhance employee quality of life during the pandemic. I'll be talking about leadership and the need of what are the requirements of leadership during this time. Tim is going to come back and talk to you about developing people within an organization. And then Danny's going to come back and talk to you about this technology that we're going to be using. And all of this, hopefully, around this concept of sustainability and reliable processes. I think the important thing that we have to understand about the pandemic is we have a workforce that has already entered into the pandemic with a great level of stress. If you look at the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, it claims that the productivity of this nation, which has been outstanding over the past several decades, has been primarily based on getting our workforce to work longer and harder and under more stressful conditions. That is an important thing. That is, we have achieved productivity more so than through automation and more so through continuous improvement. However, when we come into the system and we look at this workforce that's already stressed, you have to understand that we have really amplified this level of stress. And the stress comes from the job loss or anticipation of a job loss, anxiety over going to work, all right, loss of work-life boundaries, a feeling of isolation, and the need to be able to develop new skills, such as new management skills, all right? For example, I was reading on the fact that you need emotional quotient, the ability to have an emotional quotient to be able to manage people over this different technology, and the need for new skills. So we have a workforce already stressed and further being stressed. So the question then becomes is, I need to have somebody that's a leader, but that is not such a leader, but it's a servant leader. A servant leader is somebody that is there to be able to provide opportunities and to allow the people to grow. So the first thing that we have to, I think, in my opinion, that the servant leader has to do, an attribute that they have, is something about their self-awareness and how they think. This morning we had a presentation and we talked about the fact that majority of us, based on how we were raised, believe in the fact that the harder we work, the more productive we are. The harder we work, the more productive we are. All right. So the question then arises is if you look at the graph on the right, it indicates, on the horizontal axis, it indicates to you the most productive nations. On the vertical axis, it indicates the amount of hours per week that somebody works. And if you look at this line that we drew in, isn't it amazing that it says to you that the countries that are the most productive are the ones that seem to have the least amount of work that they do. The countries that seem to be the least productive are the ones that seem to be working more. So the first question that I have for you as people that are listening, and I would say you can identify your leaders. Are your leaders one that believe that hard work is based on effort or hard work is based on the well-being of the workforce? That's important. In my opinion, it is to have to be balanced with a little bit of shift over to the fact that we have to look at the well-being of our workforce during this pandemic, especially to get them through the stressful times. Question number 2 is, what should be the attribute of a servant leader? And again, I would ask you the question, does your leader have an appropriate communication language to indicate that they are a servant leader? So what is it the communication should be based on? The communication should be based on the idea that I am not here to dictate. My job is simply to help people do a better job with less effort. That's the second attribute. The first, awareness of where that leader comes from and their paradigms. The second is to transition and to be able to communicate the fact that that leader is there to get you through tough times by making sure that you do less work. Now, we talked earlier and what we discussed was that in many cases, for majority of us, isn't it amazing that sitting at home, I'm sitting in my office at home, I actually work harder than when I went to the office. The demands on my time are much greater. The distances, rather than walking and saying, I'm going to go meet somebody for half an hour that gives me a break between two meetings, I have 2 minutes before meetings that need to occur. And every time, every day, I have meetings starting from the morning to the evening. That's not exactly what we want. So the communication language is very important in our leader. Three, I think it's not just the communication, that the leader truly has to empathize with what the workforce is going through. So it's not an intellectual discussion that says, oh my God, yeah, I see what's going on and I know what's going on. They have to empathize with that particular thing. When we look at this ability that we have been under stress, we work more hours than most other countries. Our work balance life is not very good. All right. I am now in an environment in which I actually work in majority of cases, we spend more time working. All right. And I'm to some extent isolated from all of these things. The leader has to be empathetic to that particular thing. So when I'm looking at, for example, performance evaluations at the end of each year, is that leader going to empathize enough to be able to consider that we are going through COVID, or are we simply going to go back and assume that the evaluations should be exactly like the years previous to that? All right. I think the fourth attribute of a servant leader is not only that they have to empathize with what's going on with the workforce, but they have to internalize the fact that there is a conflict. between productivity and workforce quality of life. This morning, we talk again at a different webinar that if you look at the the left-hand side, this is an example of Boeing 737 facility. On the top is the way it used to be. On the bottom is a moving line. So I've got planes moving. And this is, according to engineering, a marvel because we actually took the time that it takes to finish a plane to half the time. But when I look at those individuals that are working on that plane, I find that they work to a drum beat. You know, there's a time. They're under time stress. I'm looking at majority of the individuals doing repetitive and routine work. And I don't have the freedom to get up and go and say, I'm going to get a cup of coffee at this moment because I feel like it or I want to go to the restroom. Yet, from a engineering perspective, from a business perspective, it's a marvel. But if I look at those individuals, these are the attributes. When I click on again, I look at Moses in one of these old movies that's rowing a boat. He was a slave. I look at those attributes of his work. Did he row according to a drum beat? Yes, he did. Was he under time constraint? Yes, he was. Did he do routine and repetitive work? Yes, he did. Could he get up and say, hey, I'm going to go to the restroom or I'm going to go to get a cup of coffee? Not really. There is not 100% correlation, but isn't it amazing that what we believe was uncivilized, okay, are the same attributes we're putting into our design system. So our leaders have to understand that just because something looks good doesn't exactly mean that it's good for those individuals that are already under stress. The servant leader that has now internalized this conflict and understands that when I make changes, these changes don't sustain because people don't like these changes, must change the focus to cultural development. In manufacturing, generally speaking, we always focus in on we need to increase our throughput. We need to reduce our quality. We need to increase our cash on hand. We need to do this. It's never been about the fact that there is a culture that is behind each of these productivity. So a servant leader's attribute is one that says, I am going to develop a culture that has the greatest probability of achieving the values of an organization. You notice that simply by putting the culture on top, you give priority to people. And in my opinion, in many cases, people have really, we give lip service to the fact that people are important. But in majority of cases, when we design things, we actually treat them exactly like an asset. It's an asset that we use, and then we dispose of this asset when the asset is not good enough. So we need to shift over to culture. If we can click one more time. In this workforce, you have to give this workforce autonomy to think for themselves, to grow and be valued. So every leader must develop in their workforce this ability for critical problem solving. And what we find is that in majority of cases, people are very good at solving some things, but people are not so great at defining things, and people are not that great at sustaining things. So the leader understands that. When I define a problem, I know what to solve. If I don't know what the problem is, I have to make multiple attempts to solve the problem because I really don't understand it. Defining the problem is a weakness. Sustaining a solution is a weakness because we make an assumption that as soon as we solve a problem in manufacturing, I can then walk away, and that initiative then has a life of its own, and it's an infinite life without any maintenance. That's the assumption that we make. And therefore, we have a leader that understands that that's not true, that they have to develop a group of people that have the ability to define, solve, and sustain a solution. I think that the leader must do everything possible to reduce the amount of work that is given to its workforce. For those people that are in manufacturing and we say we want to improve manufacturing, okay, I not only have a full-time job, but I have a job that says I need to go out and continue working on it. We take it flippantly and say, well, that's everybody's responsibility. But that's not true. I never signed up for this job and this job and this job and this job, and you add on to those jobs because it simply makes sense for us to do it. A leader's job is to understand the problem from a strategic perspective and reduce the amount of work that is provided to its workforce, because in my opinion, the people that understand their processes well, their systems well, they know where the problems are. I can solve it with one initiative or two initiatives. If I really don't understand what's going on, I'm going to have multiple initiatives. And again, the idea that we measure ourselves by Kaizen events. I did 500 Kaizen events. To me, it's absurd to be able to say that I did 500 and that's a sign of quality. If it was really quality, you could have solved that problem in 2 activities rather than 500 activities. Here's a Kaizen event. Kaizen event 1, Kaizen event 2, Kaizen event 3, Kaizen event 4, I'm done. I didn't make any change, but I've got a lot of Kaizen events. 2, every initiative that we take on strategically must be tested to make sure that it has an outcome to organizational well-being. I've seen many projects going on, many initiatives going on in manufacturing that really look good but have no impact on the organizational outcome. My question has always been, why do a project if it has no organizational outcome? So a servant leader has the ability to tell its people and to teach them the fact of understanding what projects they should take on, and the projects they should take on are the ones that have organizational outcomes that are desired. I believe one of the biggest qualities of a servant leader is the ability to take responsibility. When manufacturing, when we talk about the key word that I always hear is the word efficiency. What if I told you all in a memo, you're not efficient? I really want a minute to think what you're thinking at this moment. You're not efficient. It has a negative connotation. 80% of the work that you do is waste. You are not efficient. If you were my neighbor and you came over and to use those words, I would have a reply for you. But because it's at work and it's accepted, we actually hurt each other's feelings and we pass the buck using this word efficiency. A servant leader is one that designs reliable processes. I take the responsibility for designing a system that ensures the success of my people. I will design a system that will get you the people, the material, the equipment, the information when you want it at the time you want it. That's my responsibility. That's what I do as a servant leader. I am going to make sure that you're successful. How many of our events do you think, how many of our leaders do you really think that way? That it's my responsibility to design a system to ensure my people are successful. And then we have this issue of employee quality of life. Every manager, every leader must not only reduce the level of resources that are required to run the company, must align these resources for organizational outcome, must focus their efforts on reliability and not efficiency, but at the same time, at the end, they must inherently design into the DNA of their processes and things the fact that we do not reduce the motivation of individuals, we do not reduce the engagement of individuals, and we do not get them to do things that are out of their cultural norm. If you do those things, if you go into a process and design a process, and you look at motivation, you look at engagement, and you look at cultural alignment, these are typically things that we always say, oh, I talked to Buddy and Buddy was okay with it. We've never inherently sat down and looked at motivation, engagement, and cultural and said, have we really violated our people's needs? And if you do those 10 principles, these are the 10 principles that I think are the basic fundamentals of a leader that's going to take us through the pandemic and post the pandemic. And I think Tim is now going to take you through systems thinking and its relevance to the workforce.
Thank you, Dr. Sani. If you consider the 10 attributes of a servant leader that Dr. Sani just shared with us, you can't help but notice that they're all people-centered. And if an executive team is going to lead in this manner, they have to focus on developing a rich culture of development, or a culture of learning. So what is a learning organization? If you would, in your chat function, if you have some ideas around this, how would you describe a learning organization? What are some of the key attributes? Just populate the chat box real quick and let's see what some of your ideas are. What are some attributes of a learning organization? Seeking input, that's right. People-centered, absolutely. Good documentation and communication. Willingness to try new things. Those are all really, really accurate. Those are good. And if you consider, well, let's look at Peter Senge's seminal work describes this type of organization this way. I'm going to bring these up slowly so you'll have a chance to read them. An organization where people continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire, where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, and collective aspiration is set free, and where people continually learn how to learn together. Now, I guess the question I'd like to ask you to dwell on as we go through this is, can you describe your organization that way? Because the question of why do this, I mean, if you remember, Dr. Sani pointed out that our people are under a lot of stress already. Even without the current pandemic, we are taxing our workforce in many, many ways. Consider the changes that were going on before COVID. Technological advances were putting people under great stress. Things like augmented reality and artificial intelligence are changing many types of traditional jobs. Globalization has added pressure, and just the speed of innovation itself. Think of something as innocuous as our attitude around time and how it's changed. Concepts of busyness and work-life balance. So a learning organization whose culture is centered on learning to become more adaptive, to become more creative and innovative, actually attracts and engages people. Think about the attributes and think about the advantages, for the employee. You have a better job environment. It creates opportunities for greater contribution, opportunity to earn promotions and increased earnings, and enhances job security by providing transferable skills. Now, when I talk to manufacturers about transferable skills, they get a little bit nervous. But if you train your people so much that they enjoy their environment there and your culture, they're less apt to leave. But if they do leave, don't we know we want them to be successful even if they leave us? For the company, you have lowering operating costs, which that involves production, quality, creating a flexible workforce that we talked about, being able to solve problems and critically think about things. Improve safety is important. And then there are other benefits. If you expand it out to the community, engaging larger labor pools and being able to choose from other employees that maybe have had a hard time finding work. If we can do this well, we can expand into those pools. So there are a lot of advantages to creating a learning organization. But how do you do it? Building a learning organization is actually a journey. It takes time and it takes dedication to the cause. There's a certain intentionality that runs through the organization, built on processes that promote learning for everybody. It's important that it's part of the way that we think and we live. We call it being part of the company's DNA. Having development and career ladders that kind of like a map of where the employees are able to progress in their development keeps them engaged and gives them something to shoot for. We create a system of accountability for learning so that it's important to everybody. And obviously, when people do achieve some of those successes, we reward them and recognize them. And that last point goes back to something Dr. Sani was talking about in leadership. We develop leaders who value people and value learning. That's a critical component of beginning to build a culture like that. But that's just the beginning. It's important to start well when you're developing a culture of learning. It's also important to build in sustainability from the beginning. Now, if you think about this circle here, you have action, reflection, theory, and praxis, which is practice. What does it take to sustain this? Well, and there's three important keys. One that we've spent the last 20, 30 minutes talking about is strong leadership. You have to have a compelling mission and a vision for people to grab hold of. And you have to have reliable systems. And a reliable people development system, or what some might call a workforce development system, is crucial to this process. So, the COVID pandemic has certainly created a great deal of chaos. Change doesn't often come at this magnitude, but it certainly still comes, doesn't it? Manufacturers have had to adapt just like everyone else. And certainly not just to the pandemic, but those unending stream of changes that we were facing even before this pandemic over the last couple of decades. There's new products, new materials, new supply chain realities, new attitudes from generations moving through the workforce, and new technologies that demand skills that seem to be lacking in significant ways and at significant levels. But our people, our workers, have made many adjustments too. In some cases, think about just recently, they had to shift away from their typical product mix they were very familiar with, and a lot of them began to make personal protective equipment. A drop of a hat, companies changed directions, and our people were involved in that. They had to be flexible in their work schedules, their duties. We needed their help to navigate this stream of changes. But what I want you to think about is this ability to be innovative and to learn to roll with those changes. That seems to be the new normal. The way our in-house people development systems support this new normal will be critical to the success of all U.S. manufacturing. So here's another question for you. In the chat box, if you will, think about people development as a system. And what would you say are the functions that make up that organization? Excuse me, that organization's internal people development system. What does it consist of? What are the things that you do internally that would be part of your people development system? Hiring and onboarding, that's good. The LMS, that's certainly there. Recruitment, motivation, documented training. Thank you, Tracy. That's an important one. So all of these things, as we think about the way that we find and we train and we retain people, that is a system. And all manufacturers, all organizations that deal with the staff and with hiring people, you have this system already intact. But when we think about systems thinking, it's more of a holistic way to see these connections. We consider our people development systems, it's the inclusion of different perspectives that allow us to see more of these types of connections. We can see the feedback loops. We can see those relationships and the interactions, as well as systems within systems. Now, what does it look like though? Well, there are 5 functional areas, and it begins with this idea of developing people through a learning culture, a culture of learning through these 3 areas: job skills, cognitive learning, and continuous improvement. Now, job skills is the unique job skills necessary in every operation, because every one of you as manufacturers, as service providers, doesn't matter what you do, the way you do things is unique. And so you need to train people to do it your way. When engineers come out of the University of Tennessee, they have very good foundational knowledge, but they may not understand how to do what it is that you need to do. So they have more learning to do. So that job skills training in your training program has to do with your unique processes. Cognitive learning is teaching people how to think, how to solve problems, how to communicate. Alongside technical skills, they learn cognitive skills that they can use not only in the workplace, but they also take these things home and they use them in the community as well. So there's great benefit in that. And then continuous improvement is training people in systems and processes that promote truly continuous improvement. And I want to emphasize that, because continuous improvement isn't doing a Kaizen event every 60 days, every 30 days, every quarter, whatever it is. That's periodic and episodic. That is not continuous. Continuous is thinking about it every day. It's getting into the habit of improving and looking for opportunities and innovations every day. That's a developed habit that we can form. And you do that through deliberate practice and structured training and systematic methods. And as Tracy pointed out, documented training that can be repeated. What are the other parts? Well, somebody mentioned recruiting. You know, an effective training program sends signals to the recruiting function, telling it the types of people that are needed. So you can look for attributes and talents and not just experience and education. The feedback that happens between these 2 functions help to improve your job postings. And it can give you specificity over the type of person with the attributes that you're looking for and expand those recruiting pools potentially. It also, it affects our onboarding. And actually onboarding starts at the recruiting phase of this. So the training helps to establish development pathways for each individual so that from day one, they understand how they're going to be developed, how the company is going to invest in them. And this creates value in a stickiness that becomes, it makes it harder for them to leave for a competitor down the street that might offer them just a little bit more money. Now, retention is another piece. When it comes to empowering those folks through development pathways and career ladders to see where it is that they can go from their position, how progress is being made. It tends to, the development pathways keeps them on track, the career ladders keeps them focused on the long term, and all of this drives engagement. And it all comes back through the training program. So that's kind of the engine that drives the process. And we expect that it's going to improve performance, right? Our training program should always improve performance. But sometimes those two aren't very well linked together, and we have a hard time getting people to proficiency quickly. And other times it's just leaving some of our team members disengaged and our company kind of disappointed in the way the performance management process works. So if you stand back and you looked at this whole process, you would recognize that all of these parts of the system influence and impact each other. And looking at the whole system enables you to make better choices and more impactful improvements. Now, if you think of these arrows as they go through this diagram, you can imagine that is information. But in some cases, you can think of it as the pathways that people travel as well. So retention is definitely affected by recruiting and robust onboarding. Performance management influences retention and empowers recruiting. Great onboarding processes, as I said, they start at the recruiting piece, can enhance the successes of the 4 other functional areas, and training is that engine that drives it. Now, looking at your own people development systems in this way allows for the process improvement or continuous improvement of your workforce development system. It allows you to look at incremental improvements and multiple ways to make those improvements happen. You know, those of us in manufacturing for lots of years, we look at manufacturing processes and we can see the system and we see the connections. You can apply that same mentality to people development systems. Cultures run through the entire organization. It's from the front door to the back door. And Dr. Sani shared some important servant leader attributes earlier. And right here, we're looking at 4 of those and how they might come alongside this idea of a system for managing and developing people. A C-suite executive has a role to play, as do the operations leaders and the frontline supervisors. Coaching other leaders within the organization is crucial to establishing the culture of development, which is a culture of learning. This concept is true for all types of organizations, certainly for manufacturers, but also for service companies, nonprofits, and any other entity that relies on people to accomplish their mission. You know, the executive leadership understands the need to build systems that are people-centered. That's the message that Dr. Rupi and his team, Dr. Sani, Rupi, and his team are working to help companies understand. Executive leadership is important in this. The people development system is well designed and supported, and if it's repeatable and can be continuously improved, it adds to their ability to manage in this capacity. It unleashes your whole team's creativity and their enthusiasm. It engages people. And that type of culture of learning gives an organization certain competitive advantages because not everybody's doing this. And it's hard to find in the marketplace where companies are actually taking this people-centric approach. Now, when we think of change, as we've said, one of the major changes that all companies will face is the continuous wave of new technologies. And Danny's going to talk us through some of those technologies and share some of the systems thinking in this area that can help you as companies continue to be very, very competitive.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Dr. Sani. It is exciting to envision the workforce and leadership strategies that you all are proposing today, and the people-centric thinking, systems thinking perspective. Sense the passion that you have, and I'm excited to be working with you. I want to take a few minutes today to talk about technology from a systems perspective and shed light on how technology and workforce and leadership are all interconnected and can create a brighter future post-pandemic and an improved quality of life for everyone. Many people are apprehensive about how technology will affect our lives in the future. For example, some studies show that artificial intelligence will replace large portions of our current jobs today. But in the past has shown that technology has a net positive effect on society. We'll take a look at some data that shows that. And I'm not the only one that shares this viewpoint. Tom Kerfis is the Chief Manufacturing Officer for Oak Ridge National Laboratory. In his position, he has access to the most sophisticated artificial intelligence programming and the fastest computers in the world. And yet Tom makes the point to say, and quote, "You will hear a lot of concern about the middle class in the context of advanced manufacturing. You may hear terms like lights out fat facilities. It's not happening. People are just too valuable." End of quote. So again, we're really excited to talk about this. Before we dive in, we'd like to take a minute to define technology. We're going to look at several here that you see here, and so we just want to make sure that we're well grounded and communicating well. And fortunately, that's easy to do, to define technology from a people-centric perspective. So we can define it as relative to each individual user. For example, if you can use 5G cellular technology in your office today, 5G is not technology to you. The tools that help us do our work are not technology, even if they are highly sophisticated like 5G. Your phone today is not technology. It was when it was on the shelf at the Apple Store in 2007, but now it's just another tool that helps you through your day. The systems that you do not use right now that are more developed, that are faster, offer newer features, or perhaps change our work in new ways, these systems are technologies. For the sake of our conversation, let's define technology as the next set of systems that you think may be able to help you. How will you understand these technologies in a way that helps you make better decisions in your role now? How will these technologies affect your entire business? Manufacturing USA is a collection of institutes that the University of Tennessee is actively involved in. There are some very interesting technologies. Some are more familiar to us than others. For example, additive manufacturing is becoming an integral part of medical devices, the aerospace industry, and a large market for bespoke product needs. Prototyping is a market in and of itself. How will these technologies affect your workforce in the future? What we have to think about is the fact that these technologies, as we know them right now, are going to become even faster, cheaper, and more usable and user-friendly in the future. So you may imagine these in an office setting in the future, whereas right now they are in laboratory spaces and on manufacturing floors. Another technology to keep an eye on is something called flexible hybrid electronics. They're in NextFlex there in California that you see. An example of an application here is wearable electronics. You might find in the future that your computer, your motherboard, the motherboard itself isn't on a hard surface as you're familiar with now, but maybe on something that's more akin to saran wrap, and you wear it on your sleeve. If you could ship product without having to pick up a phone or pick up a barcode scanner, how much more efficient could we be? How much more accurate could we be? Robotics is another area that I say to myself, this is as good as it's going to get, right? I mean, we can't get any more sophisticated than collaborative robots that we see today. But again, there's the institute is called ARM, and it's developing more, creating algorithms that make robots and collaborative robots much more ubiquitous and much more friendly for users. And this robotics, it eliminates the repetitive work that Dr. Sani lamented earlier. And so all of these technologies are improving our lives every day. Carbon fiber is something that's being developed here in Knoxville. Speaking of reducing costs, we have much to look forward to in automotive and aerospace and many other industries because of the work that's happening in carbon fiber. And this is and thanks to research and development efforts to reduce the cost. The latest generation Corvette uses a new process to produce a lightweight carbon fiber rear bumper. And one more that I'll highlight for you is Photonics. It's called the AIM Institute. That is the study of photons, which are opposed to electrons, which are used right now, electrons being used to light our light bulbs and also to process information on the silicon wafers in our computers. Photons are about 100 times faster than electrons, just traveling distance-wise. So this technology will make our current computers look slow. And so this is an area where artificial intelligence can start to speed up even more rapidly than it already is. Artificial intelligence is a little bit more difficult to contextualize, but you could use the analogy of robotics. You know, robots are taking repetitive physical labor away from us and allowing humans to do what they do best. And artificial intelligence will, in the same way, eliminate repetitive decision making. So again, it's creating higher paying jobs, higher quality jobs that define, you know, what's most valuable for humans in the workforce in general. So I'll just stop here just for a second before we move on to the next slide. So what's going through your mind when you hear these technologies? Can you draw a path from where we are today to what the future will be when these technologies aren't technologies anymore, but they're merely everyday tools that we use? And can you view today's tech research with systems thinking? For the last few minutes, we've addressed each one of these technologies as individual applications for the technologies. Next slide. This is a group of technologies of the past. A lot of these names are still somewhat foreign to us, but they are a series, in the same way as the previous slide, a series of disconnected technologies. DRAM cache, quick wheel, liquid crystal display, signal compression. These are all somewhat foreign technology. HTTP, we still don't use that word very much. And all of the government agencies that you see here are also somewhat foreign. A lot of them, Department of Energy, Army Research Office, National Science Foundation. These are the underlying organizations that develop technology. One that goes under the radar, pardon the pun, is Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And so what you'll see here, if Tim will click one time, you'll see that all of these technologies, taken from a systems perspective, created the first generation iPod, and then later on created the iPhone that we know today. So systems thinking can help us to understand, obviously we might not be inventing the next iPhone, but we will be using systems thinking to adapt to technology, to invest in our next set of technologies, and hopefully invest in a way that that understands how all of this fits together for our business's future. Next slide, I promised that I would talk a little bit about quality of life and how, you know, the data shows that our quality of life is improving overall. Over the last 6 months, things have been not so great, but life expectancy is doubling, as you see there. Tim, if you go one more, I think we'll see that over 50% of the world's population now has access to the internet, which I think is a great quality of life indicator. Next slide shows literacy rate, which is climbing at a dramatic rate. If you'll turn your attention to the bottom blue line there, that's the aggregate across the world. It's a staggering trend, and a very positive one. So systems thinking and technology can improve our future and improve quality of life, and it's interconnected with leadership and workforce today. Let's take a few minutes to look at your business and start to think through in a more systematic way how all of these processes and technologies and thinking will affect your business. You know, your business is incredibly complex. You have internal processes and people, supply chain partners and customers, investors externally, and then you have growth opportunities, both in terms of product development, increasing throughput, and creating competitive advantages. And each one of these areas is a factor in how you're going to invest in technology in the future. A lot of businesses just focus on the pain points that they're experiencing right now. But we want to begin to think in a more systematic way about how a specific technology can not only fix what's happening on your plant floor today, but can set up your business to be transformed overall and in the future. So this is just a slide that, to me, really encapsulates what we're talking about today. The First Robotics program and many others like it are harnessing technology. They're understanding what leadership means and how to educate the workforce of the future. And to me, this is quality of life. This is what workers or students seamlessly working with technology and using systems thinking to come up with to solve real life problems. And the question is, how can we get on this train that's already left the station, so to speak, and how can we invest our time and our resources and our thinking to apply that to our business and our roles today. So thanks so much for your time, and I look forward to your questions and interacting more in the future.
I think if you really look at the summary, in this pandemic world, we got a lot of things that are changing. We're looking for leaders that recognize their deficiencies and internalize those deficiencies, improve themselves, and become servant leaders. One of the things they do is focusing on the training of individuals, and you notice that Tim Waldow talked to you about the importance of training to every aspect of an organization, but to be more specific on being able to be a learning organization. And then Danny came in and talked to you about the fact that you have technology that can kind of help you through this process in the pandemic. And he talked to you about how this technology that is new can immediately make an impact, okay, but over a period of time becomes a natural phenomena for you. So we have, within the pandemic, the ability to change our leaders, the ability to change our people through a learning organization, and respond through technology in a really appropriate manner. That's really, in essence, the summary of the presentation today.
Thank you so much to our speakers for all that you have shared with us this afternoon. At this point, we would be glad to take any questions from you as participants. You're welcome to turn your cameras on, unmute yourselves, and ask your questions directly to our speakers. Or, of course, you're welcome to use our chat feature, whichever you're more comfortable with. Is there anything we can elaborate on a little bit more for you, or perhaps you want to share a challenge or a struggle from your organization and use the mind share we have here this afternoon to identify some opportunities?
Surely we said something that would pique someone's interest.
And if not, of course, we can let you get back to your afternoon a little bit ahead of schedule, which is always a wonderful thing. And the information, contact information for each of our speakers is on our webinar website, which I'll type in the chat in just a minute. We do have a couple questions coming in. All right. Thank you, Jake. Jake asks, how could these ideas and models be used to improve the rising cost of healthcare?
Tim, Danny, do you want to answer that?
I think one of the interesting things that we've seen in the healthcare sector is the adoption of something called Toyota Kata. And it's a problem-solving technique that comes out of Toyota production, but it's been widely used to help teams learn how to think scientifically is the way that they bracket it, and something that we use quite a bit. The interesting thing that it does is it changes the dynamics of a team. Now, I don't know much about the healthcare industry, but I think some of the rising costs have to do with finding people, retaining people, training, and those types of things. So anytime you improve the environment inside an organization and you don't have as much attrition, or you have better and more effective training, it should have a positive impact on reducing those costs. So things like teaching people to work together in a structured manner to solve problems, to communicate with each other well, and to build a culture where they are actually buying in, if you will. I keep overusing the word engagement, but buying into the idea that, you know, what I'm doing here makes a huge difference. And I think for Dr. Sani and the leadership piece, I'll leave him to kind of speak to that. But for me, it's building a culture of learning in an organization where no matter if it's healthcare or otherwise, that the people they're engaged, they're more effective and efficient. They're not stressed out as much because they're having problems with trying to solve issues that just keeps making their life more stressful. So, Dr. Sani, you want to speak into that?
I think over the past 5-10 years, we've done multiple projects with hospitals. And I would look at cost in two different ways. One is operational cost, and you're talking about operational cost and reducing operational cost. And the second, I think, is the cost of errors that exist in the medical field. To me, it all goes back down to people. For example, I can give you two examples. One from a study that we did. We looked at a surgery in a hospital, and we found that the surgeries were not being completed on time. Therefore, the hospital was incurring a lot of cost of keeping people beyond the time they need so they can complete the surgeries. All right. And so we started looking at what can we do? And we noticed that if the first surgery starts late, well, automatically the second surgery that's going to be in in that same operating room is going to start late and so forth. So it propagates. What do you think was the reason? The reason was that physicians didn't show up. And if the first physician didn't show up on time, then they would start late and therefore it would propagate. When they asked the physicians, why don't you show up on time? Their answer was, well, things are never ready on time, so why would I want to show up on time? And so one of the things we found was, one of the main concerns was the rotation of the room. To get a room ready for surgery, so there was this issue of communication that exists, and it's people. It is the ability to be institutionalized. Because I'm going to start late, I'm going to come late. If I'm going to start late, I'm going to come late. That's one from certain studies that we did. More specifically, over the last year, as my personal, one of the things I've learned is that about 10 months ago, they told me that I have multiple myeloma, and about 3 months ago, after chemotherapy, I went to Emory University Hospital, and I was there for the bone marrow transplant. One of the things I learned was that you have physicians and you have technicians and you have nurses and so forth down the line. It is a matter within this link of one individual being off and the entire system is off. And I found out that they don't have the ability to have nurses. And they brought in nurses from other floors that are not trained for bone marrow transplant, and they have traveling nurses. So every morning I would get up and I would have to understand who the nurse was so I can behave accordingly. And because they were nurses, they ordered a couple of times, my medication was ordered incorrectly. And if I had not caught it, they would have given me the wrong medication. So in my opinion, there's two different things. One is operational, which is people and leadership. And the second is errors that are being made. Again, this is people and communication. I mean, so all of this fits into that, and that's the way I see it.
Thank you so much. We have another.
I've got a couple. I'd love to just address that question just a little bit as well. So in general, obviously, prototyping is really important, and additive is driving down those costs, just to kind of as a general, but just more specifically, specific to the pandemic and UT's role in applying technology to delivering healthcare. The University of Tennessee has played an outsized role in the overall response. Dr. Peter Tsai is the inventor of the KN95 mask, which is a very inexpensive and ubiquitously used solution for preventing COVID-19. And the university system across Tennessee responded by using their additive technologies. The goal was 10,000 masks printed additively in a very short time frame. If you're interested in any of that, I'm happy to provide more details.
Thank you. We have another question from Stephen. What would you recommend to those who are fearful to make a decision, or rather to those who are stagnant leaders?
Fearful to make decisions or stagnant leaders? I think at least what I can start out with is I've noticed different industries have different ability to take risk or be risk averse. If you are in the government and you're dealing with important nuclear information and development, the key to being risk averse is something that is part of that institution. Because if you do make an error, then you're going to have to pay the consequences. So that becomes, I think, every institution lays out their risk. Okay, and there it's different from institution to institution, and for something that is appropriate for one institution may not be appropriate for another institution, even though it's the same level of risk taking or being risk averse. I think if you're looking at leaders that are stagnant, that's a completely different issue. uh, Leaders that are stagnant, that I would assume are not pushing for change, are not pushing for growth, are not pushing for those. Uh, Over a period of time, I would assume that those people would, are no longer motivated, and therefore, in my opinion, I mean, again, it's not that is if they're the things that are holding an organization back, then over a period of time they should be asked to leave or to find other responsibilities. I mean, as direct as that.
Well, if I could kind of add a little bit to that, Stephen, I'm not sure which level of leadership that you are particularly thinking about, but we deal a lot with frontline supervisors and mid-level leaders, and teaching them to be coaches and teachers, and trying to figure out for them, helping them figure out where that fear comes from. Are they paralyzed with fear because of something that is endemic in the culture? Is it some personal struggle that they're having? And you do that through performance coaching and those types of things. But creating a culture within an organization where the leaders are also learners, where they are expanding their abilities and their capabilities in terms of how well they can lead. It's sometimes we have great training programs, but we fail to train the trainers. How do you train people and do it really well? And sometimes we take our best operators in the manufacturing world and we promote them into being leaders, and we don't support them a whole lot with leadership training and coaching and those types of things. So I'm not sure where the fear might originate from. The stagnant leaders, sometimes they just lost their motivation because maybe they're just not buying into the mission and vision, as we mentioned earlier. It could be a number of things in there, but I think to start with, trying to figure out where the fear is coming from and what's causing the stagnation might be a good place to start. But the idea of creating a culture of learning and development also includes leaders.
And Stephen, we have two Stephens with us today. Asks, do you feel that the business pressures make it too easy for a leader to abandon their desire to change the culture to a people-centered culture and revert to efficiency and productivity metrics?
I think the answer is yes. Because if you're looking at people-centric, that means that there has to be some growth in the leadership, and there has to be some growth in the people that you develop. So it's a longer term solution. I think it's a more sustainable solution, but it's a longer term solution to be able to get to that level of productivity that you want. And if you're under a monthly performance evaluation or a quarterly performance evaluation, it's really easy to forget the people centric and make things just, you just basically perform to those expectations. And then I can see how it would be easy to give up on this people centric metrics. But my feeling has always been that you either improve the people centric and therefore reduce the level of stress within the organization, or just continue with the level of stress that you currently have, because you fundamentally are not addressing the issues, you're just trying to get a productivity level up. And I've seen productivity go up because of fundamental changes, but I've also seen productivity go up because people have manipulated numbers. Like inventory. When do you count inventory? At what date do you count inventory? Is it at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month or 2 days before or 3 days before? How many different metrics do you have in measuring inventory? Each different kind of measure measures different things. So in addition to not being people-centric sometimes, what I found out is that people actually play a lot of games on manipulating the metrics that exist that they have to report on. Tim, Danny?
Well, I agree that the answer to the question is yes. The business pressures are very real. There has to be a commitment from the leadership, especially at the C-suite, but all the way through the organization. All the leaders need to buy into the idea that we're going to stay the course and change the culture. You have to have the efficiency and the productivity metrics. They're not going to go away. That's how you measure things, but it's too easy for people to revert, as Dr. Sani said, and I think everybody knows that it's much easier to go back to those numbers when the pressure's on.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, and it takes a lot of experience and perspective and able to, in order to be able to accept that as the answer.
Dwayne comments that without integrating the people-centric approach, it is difficult to sustain efficiency and productivity.
I would agree with Dwayne. Dwayne is a wise man.
All right, we've got about 12 minutes left. If anyone has any last questions, feel free to just, turn your camera on and ask them yourself or type them in. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and wrap up. All right, well, thank you again to our speakers and thank you to our participants who joined us today. As I said, we are recording and we will send the recording off for transcription and trimming and then post it on our website, which is webinars.tennessee.edu. You can find this recording along with the 10 others that were part of the series that launched in October. And you can watch all of those from the website and share them with any of your colleagues. Of course, the series was free and open to the public, and we hope that it will continue to serve as a resource for Tennesseans and beyond. We wish you well, and we encourage you to get in touch if there is anything else that we can help you with. Otherwise, have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.